The digital age is here. With every step forward, the shadow of cybercrime looms larger, set to cost the world nearly $14 trillion by 2028. How do we stay ahead? The answer lies in the cloud resilient, adaptable, and ready to defend critical infrastructure. Join our webinar to discover how cloud technologies are transforming cybersecurity, featuring a real-world demo of how critical systems are protected from threats. From tech experts to decision makers, this is where ideas collide to shape a safer digital future. Amazon Web Services, Area, and the Asian Development Bank are bringing together the brightest minds to explore the future of digital transformation. Welcome to the Strengthening Cybersecurity and Resilience of Digital Infrastructure with the Cloud webinar.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to be here today to moderate today's panel on cybersecurity and digital infrastructure. Thank you so much. I would like to see my fellow panelists come on camera. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today for today's webinar on strengthening cybersecurity and resilience of digital infrastructure with the cloud. We're super excited to talk to you today about some of the latest trends in cybersecurity and resilience, especially because there's been so much rising interest from both governments as well as customers on cybersecurity issues, whether it's outages, online harms, or physical resilience of digital infrastructure. I'm Melissa from Amazon Web Services, where I'm the head of public policy for Singapore and Malaysia, which means that I look at a broad range of policy issues, including, of course, cybersecurity. And I'd also like to introduce some of my distinguished co-panelists today. And I'd like to invite them on camera to introduce themselves, starting with Terry Wong, Senior IT Specialist from Asian Development Bank.
Hi, everyone. I'm Terry Wong from ADB. I'm the cybersecurity architect for the ITD of ADB. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much, Terry. Next, we have Stephen Wu, Vice President at Paris AI.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Steven from Paris AI. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Next, we have Anastasia Putri, who's the Partnerships Lead at Digital Prosperity Asia.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anastasia Putri, representing the Secretariat for Digital Prosperity for Asia, or the DPA. Thank you. Looking forward to the discussion.
Great. I'm incredibly excited to have so many esteemed panelists today representing different cross-sections of society, whether it's non-governmental organizations, small, medium enterprises, or of course, startups, all in the interesting area of emerging technology. Without any further ado, I'm just going to jump straight into our panel today on strengthening cybersecurity and resilience of digital infrastructure with the cloud. I think the first question that I'd like to pose to all of you in the panel today is, based on your experience, what do organizations look for in their computing infrastructure? In your opinion, why is cloud so attractive to financial services, healthcare, and other highly regulated or critical industries? Maybe Terry, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. In the cloud computing, I think there are a few things which are really revolutionary to the industry. The first one, I think, is scalability and the cost efficiency. So in the past, organizations had to spend a lot of money investing in servers and network devices before they can run any applications. And with the cloud computing, they save money because they only pay for what they use without the need for a big initial investment. Plus, cloud infrastructure can easily be scaled up and scaled out as their needs increase. The other thing I thought of is the ease of management of those cloud resources, because everything can simply be done with a few clicks or a few commands. there's no need for IT administrators like us to physically install, maintain, or maintain any hardware. So it makes the whole process much simpler and faster. And the most important thing, I think, is the resiliency nature of cloud computing. So for ADB, we are based in Manila, and it is a place prone to natural disasters. So cloud computing is very helpful in the sense that it allows us to move our critical systems to safer locations in the nearby regions, and we can set them up resilient. This means that our operations can continue even if something unexpected like earthquake happens and our headquarters is down.
That's really fascinating, Terry. And I wanted to pick up on some of the things that you said about trying to harness kind of the resilience and real-time effectiveness of the cloud. Maybe I'll turn it over to Anastasia, since you've seen a broad swathe of concerns all across your members. Is this also similar to your members' experience? Do they see the cloud as a way to improve their resilience and real-time response?
Yeah, definitely. And I think when we talk about organizations looking into the infrastructure, like there is a specific checklist of sorts, right, that organizations are looking for. They're looking for scalability, they're looking for reliability, security, cost, as Terry has mentioned, and for MSMEs, business continuity is one of the, most important pieces, right? Because in the face of force majeure situations, like what Terry mentioned, natural disasters, which Indonesia is also sort of prone to, also cyber attacks, these are, at the forefront of the list of issues. But why is cloud so attractive, right? And so talking about that, all the things that are on that checklist, it does provide a powerful combo, and that powerful combo exists at a relatively affordable rate, and accessibility is huge for small and medium businesses. This means that for businesses of any size, cloud allows them to use tools and resources at that affordable rate, and they can get tools that's always optimized, updated, and generally at a very high standard of security that's aligned with like global best practices. I have to mention here that Indonesia, specifically where I'm based, is home to so many digitally transitioning businesses, right? There's this incredible number per May of 2024 that about 25.2 million MSMEs have entered the digital ecosystem, and many more are expected to transition. So given that number, it's sort of clear that business owners and their teams they come from all walks of life. So they have varied knowledge sets and may not always know the best, most up-to-date cybersecurity practices while they have to balance, ideas about innovation, right? This makes cloud really attractive. Again, because of their like ease of access, ease of management, and it may be easier for them to run an application through the cloud with all these updated and optimized security processes. And it makes overall the element of cybersecurity less daunting.
No, that's really insightful, Anastasia, and I just wanted to pick out on some of that, because I think one thing that we've established from talking to you and Terry is that there are risks, of course, in the tech world, such as cyber attacks and business continuity. But of course, there are also opportunities like being able to have access at a low cost and generate real-time response. And maybe then it's great for us to hear from Stephen as a cybersecurity provider. What do you think are some of the kind of costs and risks as well as benefits in this industry, and how is the cloud an opportunity for companies to overcome those risks?
Yeah, hello. Sorry, can you repeat the question? Your voice?
Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I just wanted to pick up on what Terry and Anastasia were talking about, which is that, of course, in the technology world, there are plenty of risks. For example, there's business continuity issues and resilience. And then, of course, there's also cyber attacks. But at the same time, technology also gives us the chance to mitigate those risks, whether it's through access, reliability, and lowering the cost. So it would be really key to hear from you as a cybersecurity provider. What do you think are some of the risks in this space, and some of the ways cloud technology can help us overcome those risks?
Yeah. I see. I think when the company evaluate the computing infrastructure, they looking for like the Terry Wong said lah. They want to scale up, scalability, cost efficiency. They want to compliance. They want to do the resilience. But the thing is, in Indonesia, I think organization like finance, healthcare service, they can scale their computing resource up down without they have to invest so many things in the physically infrastructure lah. So it's good for them, and also for the startup like us, it's easier for us to using cloud lah, because the cost structure is quite cheap based per use. Yeah, and then yeah, for the compliance, yeah, example in the Singapore lah, I recently go back there, and the financial institute in Singapore, they have to do the guideline from the Singapore Ministry Authorization of Singapore. So the banking and the financial institute, they have to comply with the authority in there. Yeah, as well as in Indonesia, we do have the new regulated PDP. So in order our stakeholder to manage their data protection, they have to comply, and the cloud is currently the cheapest solution for them.
Great. Thanks so much for sharing that, Stephen. And actually, I think that leads very naturally to the next question, which is why then are some organizations hesitant about migrating their infrastructure onto the cloud, and what risks are there in adopting the cloud? Because like all of you have said, there are actually a lot of benefits when it comes to resilience and when it comes to cost. So what are some of the reasons why organizations are still hesitant to migrate to the cloud? Maybe we can hear from you first, Terry.
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest concern would be those organizations' hesitation or their perception about the data security and privacy of those cloud platforms. They are usually worried that the security of their sensitive information, when those are stored off premises and being managed by a third party. Another concern would be, as Stephen has mentioned, regulatory compliance perspective. Some regulators in the countries might have strict rules about where the data can be stored and how it must be handled and processed. So maybe some organizations in the developing countries have difficulties storing their data outside of the jurisdiction because it's against the local regulations. Another hesitation would be maybe cost management, because while cloud computing can be cost effective, some organizations might be fear that there could be unexpected expenses when you choose the pay-as-you-go model. They are worried that those costs might go out of control if they don't carefully monitor their usage. So the choice of the correct technology on the cloud platform is very critical. And to me, the most significant reason for the hesitation would be technical challenges, because it requires a thorough planning and coordination and a lot of human resources for organizations to map out every step of the process of a cloud migration, and finding skillful professionals to manage the migration and the ongoing operation of the cloud infrastructure while maintaining security hygiene is indeed very difficult. And there's, of course, a high demand for these skilled professionals, but there are just not enough qualified professionals in the market to meet such demands. So this makes it challenging for organizations to transition to cloud smoothly and securely.
Well, thank you so much, Terry. I think that's a really helpful overview of some of the practical issues that organizations may face in adopting cloud. Anastasia, do you hear similar pain points around you from DPA?
Yeah, definitely. As a platform for digital MSMEs across APAC, these are common issues and common hesitancies that we're hearing as well. And so the issue about cost management that Terry brought up is really, it doesn't exist in a vacuum on its own, right? Like it's paired in tandem with the idea of relinquishing control to a third party out there. And having to face regulatory challenges as well. And in some countries that may be more difficult than others. But on these 2 points about loss of control and regulatory challenges, I think we need to remember, and members of the DPA also remember that ultimately data security is not about, it's not based on where it's located, but it's about the security that exists around it, right? Like, for example, cloud providers are set up in a way where the network of data centers have redundant backups, and it minimizes reliability issues. So again, I have to emphasize that these are indeed like very perceived risks and perceived cost risks that perhaps organizations or small businesses are not keen to take in the first step, but really when they look beyond about like what it can provide them, in the end of the day, many small, medium businesses really do still gravitate towards the cloud anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I mean, in many ways, the whole point of the cloud is that you are relying on the global infrastructure that's operated by someone who's already carried this out in many jurisdictions to a high level of security, right? And I guess that leads me to the same question, which I would like to pose to Stephen as well. You know, you mentioned regulatory compliance as a key pain point just now. Is there any other kind of risk or challenge that you see for organizations that might make them a bit hesitant about migrating their infrastructure to the cloud?
Yeah, I think based on the current experience like in Indonesia, for government and the large enterprise or medium enterprise lah, the biggest concern for them is the security, because yeah, the government tendency is they don't want to store the data in the cloud lah, because they afraid the data got breached, the potential data breach, and also they want to know if they use cloud, which the data is stored lah. Is it in the US? Is it in the China? Because it's really compliance with the local data protection and the law challenges. Because if the data stored in the different region, they have the different law for data storage and processing, right? Yeah, I think that's it lah. And the thing is, in government or the large enterprise, they have a lot of data lah. They already a long way to go, many years, because they store so many data, and it's hard for them to migrate one by one. It's very hard for them lah. Yeah, I think that's it.
I do understand. And I guess that's why I think one thing that we as a cloud service provider see as absolutely essential for our customers is finding ways to make it as seamless as possible, or, you know, to publish as many white papers, guidance, and best practices as possible so that customers can understand how to secure their workloads when they move to the cloud. And I guess that leads me to my next question, which is about the shared responsibility model. So I think based on what we've talked about for the last like 20 or so minutes, it seems like many organizations that you guys work with still have a lot of questions about security of the cloud, which is basically the infrastructure and services provided, as well as security in the cloud, which typically refers to how customers are meant to configure their services or figure out their encryption models. So across the cloud industry, there is this understanding that there's a shared model of security of the cloud where data processors like us basically help to maintain the underlying infrastructure, and in the cloud where customers hold responsibility for deciding how to architect their own workloads. I think I'd like to ask, what role do you think your own organization has to play in terms of ensuring that your infrastructure remains secure? I think I'll start again with Terry.
Okay. Yeah, so the shared responsibility model is very commonly discussed these days, and I'm sure everyone has heard about it. And it's all about the cloud service providers takes care of the security of the underlying infrastructure, while the users look after the security of the data that's hosted on the cloud platform. When I'm asked about this, I always put this analogy. Think of cloud service providers as car manufacturers and cloud platforms as the cars they produce, right? So the car manufacturers should ensure that cars are safe and comply with all the safety regulations, then pretty much like cloud providers ensuring the security and compliance of the infrastructure. They build the cloud platforms with the proper security measures, get the audit reports, what that's needed for the users, and maintain them to meet industry standards. And as users, we are just like the drivers or buyers of these cars. So while the car manufacturer ensures the car is safe to drive, it's our responsibility as the driver to know the traffic rules and drive with vigilance. A safe car doesn't prevent you from crashing the car and getting injured if you drive recklessly. So similarly, in the cloud, we need to implement good security hygiene through, say, strong access controls, suspicious activity monitoring, and encrypting the data on those kind of safe security practices to ensure our data is well safeguarded.
I really like that analogy, Terry, of the car manufacturer as well as the car driver. I think that also really explains a lot about the regulatory landscape, where there are kind of different requirements for what we call data processors, like cloud service providers, where we provide the kind of underlying infrastructure and utility, and then different obligations for data controllers, who are, of course, the customers who collect the data in the first place and decide what they want to do with it. Maybe I'll turn it over to Anastasia next to comment on what you think your own organization should do in terms of ensuring that your infrastructure remains secure.
Yeah, sure. First of all, I want to echo that I really like that comparison as well with the car. But for the DPI, I suppose we can speak on behalf of the MSMEs, and there are a few considerations for MSMEs, right? First of all, it's really important to consider that SMB's reputation is 100% reliant on, one, the innovation that they can bring, and two, on the safety that they can bring to and reliability that they can bring to users. So there's constantly a balancing act, and companies have always felt the burden of making services safe because it ultimately factors into the reliability of the digital company itself. The ability of a company to sell their products is dependent on the safety and reliability of the products. And of course, if, for example, something happens to your data, you can lose customer confidence and just like lose reputation. The second consideration here that I want to bring up is that we also know that cyber attackers often target smaller organizations due to perceived vulnerabilities. And these perceived vulnerabilities are like lower cybersecurity expertise or fewer resources. So as users of the cloud, SMBs, in our opinion, have to take proactive steps to manage their part in the shared responsibility model, which is to ensure that they protect their applications, they protect their data, and they protect their user access. What does that actually mean in real life, right? Like, it means, amongst many other to-do lists, it means that they allow strong access controls and access management in general. And then they also provide data encryption and protection and ensure that everything is in compliance with relevant regulatory frameworks, and on top of that, reviewing this kind of set of things very regularly to ensure that it's aligned with whatever is going on. And so this all becomes really important for small, medium businesses, especially with like the cyber threat landscape becoming very unpredictable. And the reason why I'm saying all of this is to say that from our conversations with MSMEs, the conclusion is that cybersecurity is very important, and they agree that at the same time that it's like important, there's also tools available out there that's just like easily available and can be engaged efficiently. And as such, a lot of firms or companies, as our members, have also just relied on cloud service providers. This decision goes hand in hand with like the scalability that they're looking for. Whether you're small or large, you'll just be guaranteed by the same level of security. And to take full advantage of that security, though, at the end of the day, small, medium businesses really need to adopt this kind of like proactive mindset first and kind of like step up to their role as well.
Thanks so much, Anastasia. Actually, I really liked what you said about small businesses having to take a more proactive approach and think about different measures that they can also put into place. For example, you mentioned access controls, which to me, if we take the car analogy even further, access controls is like, who do you as the driver let in and out of your car? Or for example, you talked about encryption, which I guess would be whether or not you lock your car after you park it. So I think helping small businesses understand that there are a lot of controls that they as the driver also need to implement themselves in order to achieve security is absolutely crucial. And with that, I'll turn over to you, Stephen, to also talk about what do you think you as an organization need to do in order to make sure that your infrastructure remains secure?
Yeah, okay. I think like the Anastasia said, for the cloud provider, their responsibility for their physical security and data center. Example like the AWS, they offer the certification, FedRAMP, So they guarantee the infrastructure meets straight the regulation. So yeah, the customer feels safe to put the data in there. But for our responsibility is I want to add like the Terry comment regarding the strong access point, encryption, continuous monitoring. But also in Indonesia, we have to do the incident response protocol. So like the bank in Indonesia and other financial center, they have to have the incident response, the CSIRT, to manage the cyber threat. Is there any cyber threats happen? So we can also manage by ourselves, not depending to the cloud provider also. Because if the breach happen, yeah, of course, there is a lot of thing, yeah, we cannot do lah. Yeah, ultimately the cloud security partnership between cloud provider and us we secure each other. So hopefully the digital environment can be maintained lah.
Thank you so much for your views, Stephen, and for echoing what everybody has said about the shared responsibility model. Before I move on to the next question, I just want to remind everyone that if you've got any questions, you can send it in through the Q&A feature in the Zoom panel so that we can try and address your questions at the end of this session. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, I think, given everything that we've talked about so far, about how the cybersecurity environment is quite dynamic and threats are always changing and evolving, it seems pretty clear that organizations, especially critical infrastructure entities like utilities, healthcare, finance, need to adopt a secure by design approach. So I think I'd like to throw it then to the panelists to give everyone else on the webinar a little bit of my idea of what does a secure by design approach mean to you. Starting with you, Terry.
Yep, sure. That's a very good question. Actually, that has been ADB's journey for the past few years. So, to implement security by design, we actually it's all about building security into every aspects of an organization's infrastructure from the very beginning. It's way more effective to design things in advance in a green field rather than trying to fix issues after anything has been implemented. And we've spent almost a year in ADB before we migrate our first workload to cloud platform because we want to get the security design right. We started by coming up with standard cloud reference architecture, also known as the landing zone, before migrating any workloads. This provides a solid foundation for all the future deployments. And it's also crucial to define the security configuration baselines for each type of workloads that's to be deployed on cloud, such as the virtual machines, the containers, the cloud databases, or in AWS storage buckets. These security configuration baselines could ensure every component meets a minimum security standard. It's just like, okay, seatbelts are provided for you on this car, but you have to remember to buckle it up, right? Yeah. Also, if feasible, it's also important to adopt DevSecOps approach. It could be very beneficial in the sense that administrators provisioning workloads based on hardened and standardized templates, making the process more efficient and more secure. That reduces the chances of misconfiguration, people forgetting to buckle up, and we can bake in the security logging and monitoring rules to the workloads from the very start. Yeah, on top of that, maybe, before migrating a new system, we should really conduct a threat modeling exercise to help an organization identifying the crown jewels in the business process. What are the data you care? What's most critical to you and couldn't be lost? What's the risk of migrating such crown jewels to the cloud? By understanding these risks, organization can decide, okay, what kinds of security measures we have to put in place to protect those crown jewels without overkilling or overdoing it. So predefining such security guardrails and principles can facilitate the modeling process. And finally, I think it's really, really important to have a security acceptance checklist before any systems really goes live and runs and operates production data. This could ensure that the actual workload implemented is hardened according to the security design, providing an additional layer of assurance.
Thank you so much, Cherry. I think that's a very comprehensive view of what secure by design could mean. I like how you've talked about how a lot of it really is about being prepared and about coming up with risk management frameworks and having very good oversight of all the different components of your organization IT infrastructure. I think one thing that also I like that you touched on was about the need for balance, right? It's about you need to manage risk, but you also can't be overly prescriptive or overly prepared, because that will also prevent your organization from being nimble and flexible. And I guess on that note, I'd like to hear from you, Anastasia, like what do you think secure by design means to you and to SMBs in general?
Yeah, secure by design for small, medium businesses simply means integrating security into the DNA of the organization's operations from the get-go. For SMBs, that might include making security a shared responsibility across teams, like for example, by conducting an awareness training on cybersecurity. It could be as simple as that. And as mentioned, SMBs are always in this process of a balancing act between focusing on innovation and providing safety and reliability. And for startups, leveraging cloud and the security offered by cloud is definitely one of the solutions that comes with a little bit more ease. MSMEs may answer what it means to them differently if you ask them one by one, but speaking to our members, they generally agree with the premise, right? They want practicality, they want ease, they don't want to worry about having to do this from scratch, and they don't want to worry about, any kind of downtime or anything like that. Returning to this kind of like solution of cloud platforms, they really provide this kind of like enabling role to build security systems from the very start. And it helps kind of like lessen the worry for SMBs on disruptions, on data loss, on, ultimately that reputational damage piece that we keep on talking about. And interestingly, I'll bring up an anecdote from one of the members in that cloud tech has reduced the perception of cybersecurity as complex and daunting. And so, given, kind of like all the hesitancies that we've already talked about before, in the end of the day, it really does remove a lot of layers and kind of like provides that practicality and ease.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I feel like, having worked in like tech policy for a while, I would draw an analogy to data protection, right? I feel like maybe 10 years ago, when people were first starting to get to think about data protection, there was a lot of stress about what a data protection impact assessment might look like. People didn't know what kinds of controls to put into place. People didn't know what to do when they needed to have a data protection officer, or think about all of the different ways of reaching out to customers in a secure way. I think that's where the cybersecurity industry is at today for SMBs. And I think it's really wonderful, Anastasia, that you shared the ways in which cloud can actually help to reduce that regulatory burden on SMBs. And I guess then it's time for me to turn to you, Stephen, to understand what then you as a cybersecurity technology expert think a secure by design approach should look like.
Yeah. I think aligned with the Anastasia said, for the startup, cybersecurity design is like the startup, we implement the security from beginning. But for startup, if they use cloud, they don't worry about anything. They just can focus of their product, because the cloud is take care of everything. But for the large enterprise, the secure design is more like the cybersecurity mesh architecture lah. So they combine all the security into one platform or one dashboard, and also they can be the automated. So like the Terry Wong said lah, they don't have to manage the workflow one by one. So it just can manage by the automation and orchestration, something like that.
And then I guess on that note, since we talked about, kind of the burden on SMBs, which cloud might be an option to help reduce. I guess one question for all of you is, what can governments do to encourage a secure by design mindset among organizations? And I guess beyond the actual regulations and guidelines themselves, what else can governments do to send a signal to industry that the cloud is secure and to encourage cloud adoption among industry? I guess starting with you, Terry.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as you said, the base of what a government can do is definitely setting up standards, regulations, guidelines, or best practices for cloud adoption, and particularly for those critical infrastructure or financial institutions, right? But on top of that, they might also put in place policies that could encourage cloud adoption. You know, the data sovereignty considerations could also be considered to be lifted, perhaps. That's up to the decisions of each governments, of course. But at the end of the day, I think it should ultimately be up to each organization to conduct a thorough assessment, like the crown jewel assessment or the assessment over the risk, cost, and benefit, cloud readiness, whether their security is mature enough to do a cloud migration, or whether how compliant they would be to the relevant regulations to determine whether that's beneficial for them. And they must evaluate its own unique needs and circumstances to kind of come up with an informed decision. That's something they should be ultimately responsible for themselves. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Terry. And what do you think, Anastasia? Like, what are some of the ways in which you think governments can send a signal or partner with industry to send a clear signal that the cloud is a great way to encourage a secure by design mindset?
Yeah, as a coalition that's focused on policy and talking to policymakers is certainly our bread and butter, right? So logically, first of all, there should be a commitment, first and foremost, to a secure by design mindset from within the government itself. Unfortunately, that's not always a given, depending on which country you're looking at, but it's a conversation that nonetheless, I think we probably need to have. It helps when government initiate collaboration and foster public-private partnerships. For example, government can partner with industry, building and kind of like working together on an ecosystem where security becomes this kind of like shared responsibility. Or government should also consider being open to cross-sector collaboration, not only to align for cybersecurity practices across industries, but to really just have that like kind of open dialogue happening between the government and like the private sector. Speaking from the DPA, we have seen that cross-sector dialogue open up space for like new solutions and perspectives to consider from both sides. And from what we've seen, MSMEs and a variety of industry associations are indeed very eager to share a perspective given the platform to do so. As Terry mentioned, we also think it's imperative that governments put supportive regulations. I can pick up on an example here that some countries have imposed regulations on the protection of personal data, which I think we've talked about a little bit in this conversation. And some of the regulation require companies to put their data on premise, right? And although indirectly, this kind of suggests to companies that cloud is unsafe and ultimately undermines the idea that the cloud is secure. So our read is that many of these regulatory developments may indeed, talking about digital prosperity, it may indeed limit the digital economy's true potential, right? Given, all the really good things that we've talked about earlier about cloud. So this brings me back to the original point that I made earlier about adopting the secure by design mindset from the government itself, and that there has to be a commitment towards that mindset for governments to encourage this fully to the industry. And once there's commitment, then the conversation really opens up regarding cloud adoption, which we think goes hand in hand with creating the supportive regulations, such as like at a certain layer harmonizing with international best practices. Or a different example would be, the government themselves to adopt a cloud strategy, that's kind of like a show of confidence that's quite full. And more creatively, there could be more proactive campaigns about why cloud would be the best options for very highly regulated sectors. Instead of shying away from cloud tech, really lean in to educate businesses on how to use cloud platforms in a secure way. And given where we're coming from in the DPA supporting MSMEs, and given all that we've talked about today, we could certainly see from the DPA that such activations would really support MSMEs in the long run, especially in hoping that a lot of them transition into the digital space, and even for those who have already gotten started. So there's also an element of like capacity building of sorts here.
That's actually fascinating, Anastasia. I really appreciate everything you shared, especially some of the things that you said about best practices for government, whether they should harmonize with international norms or whether they should consider giving more explicit guidance on capacity building to MSMEs like the DPA. I think that those are really helpful suggestions. And I guess that it's time to turn to another voice of industry, Stephen. We'd love to hear from you and your experience, especially since you identify regulatory compliance as a key issue for you at the beginning of this panel. I think it's important, we'd love to hear your view on what you think governments can do more of to send a clear signal to industry that the cloud is secure and to encourage cloud adoption.
Yeah, I think industry, I think industry play a quite role in here, ensuring the others are also using the cloud, but the more key point is within the government sector also, because it's in Indonesia example. Like in Indonesia, if they use cloud, they have to do the BSSN, National Sandi Cyber Crypto Agency certified. And also this, I think, end of last month, the September one, also they have to do the one more certification in the Indonesia Association Payment System. So both those two certificates is ensure that they are already regulated in Indonesia, and they said that the cloud is safe, their data is safe by doing that kind of thing. And also the government should be more encouraging, like webinar, inviting the industrial, like the startups, industry, and also partnering with us, like the principle of the cybersecurity, so we can ensure them also the cloud is safe, but they have to do the couple of checklists to ensure the cloud is safe, like the incident response, the G-cert one, something like that.
Thanks so much, Steve. I really appreciate those incredibly detailed comments also on what government should be looking at. I think now let's turn to some of the Q&A from the audience. Okay, I'm going to pick this one. All right, guys. Someone has asked, I consult with many nonprofits whose stance is, I know cybersecurity is important, but I'm not sure how to start. So then it becomes a conversation about anxieties that they don't know how to take action to address. Is this a common concern that you've seen among members or others among your members in the DPA and others in the industry? And what are maybe one or two practical ways to strengthen a small to medium organization's overall security, especially on the cloud? I'll start with you again, Terry.
Yep. To me, as I mentioned, to start with the cloud migration, it's important for us to have the green fields, the design set up properly. We can make reference to a standard reference architecture, setting up the security baselines first. We can always have consultants coming in to advise on like what are the key areas that we must bake in for it to meet the minimum security standards, and we can go from there.
That's Terry. And let's hear from you as well, Anastasia. Do you find that many of your members in the DPA know that cybersecurity is important, but they don't know where to start? And what are some small tweaks or practical suggestions that you would typically offer to them if they want to get advice on how to strengthen their overall security?
Yeah, perhaps I'll take this question from a slightly different angle. So I think these anxieties come from a place of, well, it's clear it's not knowing, right? But this layer about not knowing can be strengthened by definitely engaging with the right people and engaging with the right communities as well. So on one hand, you have your technical expertise people, but then also have the communities that, like us, provide the information on the policy with regards to cybersecurity. And perhaps for people who are not technical friendly, they could start with the other layer first and then kind of like slowly seep in to see which layers of this I want to attack first. Because it has, to be fair, cybersecurity discussion automation has grown in the past few years, right? And so the layers now is a bit more multi-layered, and it's a bit more complex than before. So definitely there are some conversations to be had there about, you know, definitely engaging with like the right certification, but also engaging with the right people who are in tune with all the developments that, so like future-proofing kind of like your activities as well.
That's definitely great advice. And I guess over to you, Stephen, to answer the question about how would you work with customers or small enterprises that approach you to ask about some of the practical ways in which they can strengthen their overall security when they don't know how to begin?
Yeah, I think this happened quite sometimes with our customer as well. They don't know how to start. They don't have the budget because most of them are the startups. But we suggest they to took the bug bounty first, because the bug bounty is, yeah, they can only pay after they found the bug, right? It's quite cheap. But if the bug is so many bugs, we can do the penetration testing, and the penetration testing they can check one by one which have the hole, which I don't have hole, and then there is a just suggestion from us what the provider, what the cybersecurity tools they have to use to secure the environment, what are the typical budget they have to use. Yeah, I think like that.
Okay, we hear you as a cloud provider that budgeting is one of the top concerns of some of your customers. Thank you very much for your answers. I'm just going to move on to one of the other questions from the audience. Yes, this is a hot topic. So one of the other questions is, what are the potential roles of AI or cloud computing and cybersecurity? And what is the status of AI technology at present in cloud and cybersecurity integration? Maybe Terry, you can begin with some of your thoughts on the use, risks, and benefits of AI when it comes to cloud and security.
Interesting. So lately, we've been seeing a lot of AI taking part in cybersecurity operations area, where, you know, AI is deployed into looking into our security logs and so on, and give certain alerts. But to be honest, I'm still kind of observing it and see how the market goes. I am not too confident to fully rely on the use of AI technology in all our security operations for the time being, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. And what about you, Anastasia? I mean, I know that the DPA is mostly SMEs, but I'm sure they are also, actually, it's precisely SMEs who are the most nimble and able to adopt AI solutions sometimes. What do you think?
Yeah, so certainly I think it is kind of like a wait and see kind of thing as well. A few of our members have adopted AI into their operations, but once again, that conversation about AI and cloud service may evolve together over time, just because of how intertwined they really are. But in terms of like status of AI technology, present, I think also in Indonesia, it's still in a process of exploration as well for a lot of SMEs. Once again, like we have a large number of SMEs in Indonesia with varying kind of stages of where they're at. So some of them are a little bit more familiar and some of them are a little bit less familiar.
Yeah, fair enough. And I guess that's the thing about the state of maturity across the industry. Like there are definitely some that are a lot more mature and prepared to adopt AI solutions, especially, you know, for functions like cybersecurity. And then there are other organizations that need capacity building for cybersecurity, let alone how to apply AI to cybersecurity. Then I guess I'll turn to you last, Stephen. Since you are, after all, our industry expert, what do you think are some of the potential applications of AI to cloud computing and cybersecurity? And, you know, are there any trends that you've seen?
Yeah, I think AI solution in the cybersecurity is more like to threat detection and automatic incident response and automatic detection. Usually, like if they don't use AI, they have to check. Yeah, they have to click one by one if there's a false positive or false negative. But the AI thing, they can automatically block, automatically detect what the human can do, but the AI can accelerate what the human can do lah. I think the like that. And also the thing is the AI can do the manage all of the workflow into one workflow, so it makes the job easier lah. so they don't have to employ so many people to do the job like that in case they're replacing the L1 job to the AI job. Yeah.
I think we're definitely aligned. That's also how we see the world, which is that hopefully AI will help to automate a lot of manual tasks when it comes to technology, whether it's writing basic code or maybe helping with monitoring and logging. And I think that's definitely where we see the future of AI when it comes to cloud and cybersecurity. I think on that note, this has been a fantastic discussion. You guys have been able to share really, really wonderful insights with all of us, whether it's from the point of view of non-profits or from SMBs or from a direct technology provider. Thank you so much for taking the time to share expertise with us today. I'm now going to hand over the session to Avneet Singh, who is our Europe and Middle East Principal Industry Specialist Architect for Energy and Utilities at Amazon Web Services, where he's going to share with all of us a presentation of a use case on how to use on the application of cloud for cybersecurity in utilities and energy sector. Okay, I think Ahmed is having some technical issues. Let's give him a second. But in the meantime, thank you so much to our panelists. Really, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you.
And while we're waiting for Ahmed to come on, I'd like to remind everybody to complete the evaluation survey that Michelle has put in the chat, as we'd love to hear your opinions on today's webinar and whether or not you found this beneficial, useful, and educational. Thank you so much, everyone.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. My name is Avneet. I'm a Principal Specialist Industry Architect for OT and Renewables here at Amazon Web Services. I am based out of Amsterdam in the Netherlands. I provide the technical leadership for our EMEA customers, but I'm honestly not married to a geography. I go wherever the work takes me. I've worked with customers in Australia, India, US, and Europe. And I'm here to speak to you about OT cybersecurity on the cloud. I prepared for us a short agenda to help us navigate through the session. We will begin by doing a short introduction of OT cybersecurity. We'll go on to talk about what is the Purdue model of OT cybersecurity and how this model can then be implemented on AWS. And towards the end, we'll talk about how AWS can help our customers and yourself achieve this OT IT convergence. What is the value that the cloud is able to offer? And towards the end, we can have some Q&A. And also in between, if you have any questions, feel free to stop. So let's do a short introduction of OT cybersecurity. So OT stands for operational technology, and operational technology refers to the protection of the hardware and the software that is used to basically control and monitor the physical devices, and the processes and the equipment which are sitting in industrial settings like power plants, oil and gas plants, etc. And OT systems are crucial, to manage the operational efficiency and reliability of the assets. Some of the most well-known or significant assets of an operational technology ecosystem are something known as a SCADA system, which is a supervisory control and data acquisition. Then we have ICS, or industrial control systems. An industrial control system can be a device or any kind of equipment or a controller which is indirectly involved in the physical process that is being carried out. And then we have historians. Like some of the most well-known brands of historians are those which are given by Aviva, called OSI SoftPy, Wonderware, G, Prophecy Simplicity, Rockwell. These are some of the most well-known historians that we have in the market out there. To give you an example of how this operational technology works and how these components operate, take an example of a pump which is trying to siphon water from the well. Now, the physical process here is the siphoning of the water. The pump is the piece of machinery that is directly involved in executing that physical process. And then the pump is being controlled by some kind of computer which is telling it what is the amount of pressure it has to maintain. So that can be like a SCADA system. And then all the way to the top, we have a hierarchy of devices and various processes which are interlinked. We will see that in the when we talk about the Purdue model. Excuse me. So, what are some of the most threats, most common threats that we see in the industrial world with regard to OT cybersecurity? The first one is something known as a malware. And what happens in a malware kind of attack is the control system or the target system can no longer be used. It is in common language, you can say it's like a virus which attacks the software of the device, and it renders the device useless to operate. The second one is something known as a ransomware attack, where the attacker essentially locks the victim out of their own OT systems. This is and in order to do that, and in order to fix the problem, they will demand money. This is a most common and quite severe OT cybersecurity threat that we see happening a lot in the world today. The third one is an insider threat. This is also pretty common. It occurs when people who have access to the OT systems, these can be employees of the organization or anyone who has access to the OT environment, inadvertently, willingly or unwillingly causes damage to the asset. The fourth one is the supply chain exploitation attack, where third-party suppliers who are part of the OT supply chain, who also have access to the system, they take action to compromise the cybersecurity of the OT infrastructure. And then the fourth one is when you have the adversaries who gain access to the OT system and cause physical damage to the device. This is rare, but it does happen. And yeah, so these are some of the most common type of OT cybersecurity threats that we see here in the world. So now let's talk about the Purdue security model for operational technology. So the Purdue model for industrial control systems is the most widely accepted framework for the segregation, isolation, and defense against cyber threats for industrial control systems. It's been there for many decades now and is the de facto standard which is used to protect the operational technology assets, especially in an on-premise setup. So if you see here, it consists of five different levels. At level 0, you have got the actual device which is interacting with the physical process. So let's go back to our example of the pump, which is siphoning the water from the well. So the pump is sitting over here. It is being controlled by some kind of PLC. PLC stands for Programmable Logical Computer. That is at level number 1. Uh, at level number 2, you have got the SCADA system, which is controlling that device. And along with the SCADA system, you have something known as an HMI screen. And HMI stands for Human Machine Interface, which is the visual interface that the operator is using to control the attributes of the device. At level number 3, you have got the historians, the workstations, which are essentially collecting data from the SCADA system. And then from level 3 above, you start the IT space, where at level 3.5, you might have something known as a DMZ, where we are hosting a historian mirror, which is basically a copy of the historian that you have at level number 3. You have a patch server. A patch server is used to carry out software updates of the PLCs and devices which are located at level 2 and 1. And then at level 4 or 5, you have the complete IT layer where you can have ERP systems, web servers, mail servers, etc. What is important here to note is, if you see here, beyond level 1, level 2, 3, 4, 5, there is a firewall. There is a physical air gapping and software air gapping between these various levels. Why is it like that? It is meant to prevent a cascading effect in the event of a cyber threat. So if someone or if an attacker, let's say, gains access to an IT system, there has to be a mechanism for that malware, for that intrusion to be identified, and then the firewall is supposed to stop it. And if needed, we can have a physical barrier to essentially separate out to yeah, essentially separate level 4 from level 3.5. So there's a physical air gapping, and then there is a logical air gapping as well, to prevent any kind of cyber threat to have a cascading effect and reach the SCADA systems or the assets which are at level number 0 and 1. So that is how the Purdue model for operational technology works on premise. And there is a perception, there is a myth that this kind of sophistication cannot be built in the cloud. That is one of the barriers for OT-IT convergence on the cloud. So what we have done here is we have provided the same sophistication of the Purdue model in the cloud as well. And what you see here on your screen is each of these boxes here represents a dedicated network for the functionality of each levels from level number 0 to all the way to level number 5. So in this example, we have one network. So this is a dedicated network which has been created in the cloud. It's an isolated private network with no public endpoints. There are no public IPs. So this is here we call it OT distributed energy assets, which is going to receive the traffic from the on-premise sites. We have a second segment called OT SCADA, which is going to represent the SCADA system only. In this network, we are going to host the SCADA system. Then we have OT security. OT security is where you can host the next generation third-party firewall, like those given by Cisco, Palo Alto, or FortiGate. We have a separate network called OT maintenance, where we can carry out maintenance activities, OT monitoring, which can represent our HMI screens. And then we have a dedicated set of networks on the IT side as well, IT security, IT and egress. And so essentially what we have done is for level numbers 0, 1, and 2, it is these networks that are representing the Purdue model. Level number 3 is what we see over here, where we have got the networks for OT maintenance and OT monitoring. And then level 4 and 5 is represented on the bottom right. We have got these 3 different networks for information technology for IT. What is important to note here is that there is no direct interaction with any of the OT networks and any of the IT networks. They are completely separated and they are totally isolated. Because we do not want to have an overlap of the OT traffic with the IT traffic and vice versa, because operational technology networks are essentially a closed loop circuit system where there is no interaction with the internet. So in this way, we can replicate the same sophistication of the Purdue model in the cloud as well. This is just one piece, one picture of a very detailed architecture that we have published as part of a white paper that we have created. We can share the links with you towards the end of the call. But yeah, this is one part of a very detailed architecture as to how we can implement Purdue model sophistication in the cloud as well. So now, how does this OT-IT convergence work, given what you just saw in the previous screen? So we provide various options for how this OT-IT convergence can work. In this case, we'll be discussing 2 examples. The first one is on your screen over here. So in this case, we are looking at a terrestrial approach on how we can integrate this OT and IT data on the cloud. So what you see here is this is on the left hand side, we have a typical representation of an industrial control site. where we have a SCADA system which is receiving data from the various distributed energy assets like PLCs, wind turbines, or solar farms. These can be anything. The AWS IoT technology is agnostic to the size, scale, capacity, and cost of the asset. So this is your SCADA system, which is sitting on premise. And then at the bottom here, we have some IoT assets which are, let's say, which are monitoring temperature, humidity, pressure of the ambient environment in which the assets are housed. And what we are doing now here is we are establishing a secure private connection for OT, which is basically the SCADA system. So this SCADA system is sitting behind a firewall. From the firewall, we are establishing a secure VPN connection to the nearest point of presence. So the AWS point of presence is a point in the world. It's an entry point to the AWS private infrastructure. So many of our customers do not know that AWS, we have our own fiber. We have our own fiber, which is highly available and secure, which runs across the world. And the intention here is to bring the traffic from the SCADA system onto the cloud network as soon as possible. Why? Because the longer the OT traffic is going to traverse the public internet, it is we are increasing the attack surface. It is prone to attack, and the intention here is to minimize the gap, minimize the distance and time it takes for the data from the OT asset to reach the cloud. And typically, how customers would do this is we would use something known as a VPN connection, which is absolutely fine. The challenge here is, if you have a central SCADA sitting in London and your asset is sitting in Australia, we would make a VPN connection all the way from Australia to London. In contrast, what we can do is using the AWS private network, we can make a connection from the asset to the nearest point of presence, which in the case of Australia happens to be in Sydney. And then from Sydney, the traffic is going to use the AWS private backbone to reach the central SCADA, which is sitting, let's say, to reach your cloud infrastructure, which might be sitting in London. So that is the advantage. And once it is in the cloud, as you saw in the previous screen, we have dedicated networks to isolate and segregate the OT traffic. In this example, the OT VPN segment is going to receive the traffic which is coming from the on-premise site, and then it's going to be moved to a separate segment known as the OT segment, where where all the data which is coming from the SCADA system can be deposited. In this case, it's an Amazon S3 bucket, which is the de facto service for the creation of an industrial data lake or to store your OT data. Similarly, with regard to IoT, we create a separate VPN connection from the firewall. In this case, we are using the public internet. Why? Because the security posture of the organization might be different with regard to IoT data as compared to with regard to OT data. So for the OT data, we always have a complete private network from the edge to the cloud. In the case of IoT, if the organizations does not have the same level of scrutiny as with regard to OT data, then we can use a public endpoint to capture this data via MQTT. However, the data is still encrypted. It is still encrypted. We are using X509 certificates to encrypt this data. The only difference is in this case, we are using the public internet. So what you see here is we have SCADA, which is on premise. We have the SCADA is housing only the OT data. We are using a 100% private OT network, and we are using the public internet to capture the IoT data. So this is the first example. The second example we can talk about is a satellite-based option, where instead of the AWS point of presence or the physical infrastructure that we have in between, we have a direct satellite connection from the asset. And then in this case here, we have our own satellite service called Kuiper, and using the Kuiper terminal, in this example we have got two terminals, one terminal which is accepting the OT traffic, one terminal which is accepting the IoT traffic. It goes, they both go to the Kuiper satellite, and then from the satellite it comes to the ground, where we have got the Kuiper gateways, which are then going to push the traffic into the AWS private backbone. And then on the right hand side, you have our Purdue model for OT and IT, as you saw earlier in the cloud, where again we have dedicated networks for both IT, for IoT, and for OT. So what is essentially happening here is we are able to show the complete isolation and segregation of the OT traffic and the IoT traffic, both in transit and also at rest. So there is no overlap of OT and IT from the moment we establish connectivity with the asset on the field to the point that it actually lands in the cloud. So, what is our message here? So, what we are trying to say here is the cloud provides. So, this is a flywheel, and it provides two basic services. One is security and connectivity. We understand that security is one of the most important concerns for our customers. It is also security, as we like to say, it's job zero for us. And what the cloud provides is security and connectivity. Once we establish secure connectivity, we can bring in the OT data. We can bring the OT data from the edge to the cloud. And once we have data in the cloud, data has gravity. So once data moves into the cloud, the customers, they will be forced, or rather they would be motivated to use that data, because that data has to be liberated to extract value from it. And the first use case that we see that customers can use is something called real-time situational awareness, where we can create a live dashboard to get a picture of what is actually happening on the ground. This is one of the most simplest use cases which our customers execute as part of their journey when they talk about this OT/IT convergence. After creating a real-time situational awareness dashboard, which will mean creating an industrial data lake, we can talk about the next use case, which is advanced analytics. So our customers, they carry out in-house advanced analytics using SQL or any other technology of choice to create to run advanced analytics onto their OT data. And then that's going to lead into the third step, which is the use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and then to carry out something known as predictive maintenance. This is another very popular use case that we see when we're speaking to customers with the regard to adoption of cloud technology in OT/IT convergence. So, what is the value proposition? What is the value proposition that the cloud and AWS is able to provide here? Well, the first one is we are able to deliver the same sophistication as the Purdue model, as we have for the Purdue model in the cloud, and we can provide either a complete isolation or or a controlled isolation of OT and IT data. The cloud provides a 100% private OT network, where there is no public endpoint. Um, uh, Point number three, which is very important, and we get this feedback a lot from our customers. This cloud infrastructure allows you to get 100% ownership of this OT data. There is no middleman. Many times we have heard our customers say that while they own the asset, they operate the asset, they own the land on which the asset is located. However, they are not able to build that skill in-house, because they just don't have access to that data. The data is going to third-party vendors who are then increasing their knowledge, who are becoming experts in that particular asset which they own. So this is a great advantage that the cloud is actually able to provide. Um, the AWS private backbone, the private infrastructure, which I spoke of, it provides a military grade level of data encryption. and it's a high performance private network on which the entire AWS infrastructure, cloud infrastructure is built. So it is our bread and butter. And like I said, the intention of the solution is to bring the data onto the private network as soon as possible, so that we reduce the attack surface in the event of any kind of cyber threat. Using the AWS service called CloudWAN, we can build and manage, and actually, irrespective of your geographic location of the asset on the planet, using the AWS private infrastructure, we can create a global network which spans each and every continent. And from there, we can easily monitor, create dedicated networks, and get a single dashboard which can tell us everything: where the assets are located, how they are connected, and what is the level of security that we have in each of those segments. Seamless integration of brownfield and greenfield assets. What this means is, whatever is the category, these OT assets were built many decades ago. The first PLC was I believe made in 1968. uh, so this technology was built at a time when there was no internet, and there was certainly no cloud. So on an average, there are more than 200 to 300 industrial protocols that are being used by the assets to communicate with each other. So how do you bridge that gap? The cloud infrastructure, the AWS cloud, has services, and along with our partner solutions, we bridge this gap. We have the capacity to talk to any asset on the planet. The only thing we need is connectivity. So whether you have a greenfield asset or whether you have a brownfield asset, which is let's say many decades old, we can talk to it. And point number 7, which is very important, it provides a single point of truth of your OT data. Many times what we see is, the various departments or various members of an organization, they see what they want to see, and they are not able to see the reality. So everyone is holding a different leg of the elephant. What this solution, what AWS services and the cloud provides is, it allows the organization to build that single point of truth, which is the industrial data lake. So everyone sees the truth, and that leads to much more efficiency. It leads to the gaining of trust between members of the organization, and essentially it ensures that everyone sees the true picture instead of what they want to see. So yeah, I think this is what I had for this session. I can take any questions if anyone has got. I did see some questions come up. Yes. So there's a question on Kuiper. Yes, the Kuiper service is still not it's still not available globally. It is supposed to be launched, I believe, sometime in 2026. Yes, so it is not available right now, but once it becomes completely globally available, these are the kind of use cases that it will be able to solve. But also keep in mind, the architecture is not limited just for Kuiper. So even if you have used if you have invested in any other kind of satellite-based technology, the architecture would work with that satellite-based technology as well. So, do we have any other questions, Danny and Michelle?
I think that's the only question for now. Abhi. If there are no more questions, I think then we can end the presentation and then we'll share the recording.
All right. Okay, then thank you so much for your time, and please reach out to me or to Manny at any point in time. My details are here on the slide, and thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you.